you for coming. So we'll start with the Allen family, because Allen Park is named after the Allen family. And the Allen family's founder in Jamestown was Elisha Allen. Came here in 1816, came from Massachusetts, and he came on a trading expedition and really loved the area, so purchased land, which is now the corner of Main and 3rd, where I think, guess it's Northwest Savings Bank is. That's the land he purchased when he came. And then he went back to Massachusetts, got his family, brought them back here in 1817, and they settled here, and they built a tavern, Allen's Tavern, on that spot. But he also dabbled in real estate, buying up land, and bought a bunch of other land around town, and started different companies. They had lumbering, they had a tanning company, he worked with the mills and had a shop, a general shop, so you can see it kind of grew from there. He did very well. Interestingly enough, his father was killed when he was a young boy. His father was a sheriff in Massachusetts, and at the time, this is the 1700s, late 1700s, they didn't have a prison in the town that they lived in, so they kept prisoners in a place in their home. Okay? And usually it was just one or two at a time, but apparently there was a man there, and this is the story, is that he was charged with murdering his mother, and ended up working, coming to the Allen household, being in prison, being charged with, the father was taking care of that, and part of that was that they would work. So at one point in time, they were working out in the field, and the man turned on Sheriff Allen and killed him. So Elisha Allen lost his father when he was about 7 years old, and his mother never remarried. She ended up raising the children herself with help from her brother, but she did never remarry. And so when it was time for him to leave, he had already been in charge of taking care of his younger brothers and sisters. He was quite independent. So you can imagine coming out here wasn't a big deal to him. You know, he was on training, let's go. So that's a little background on him. He had 5 children, and one of them was Augusta Allen the first. So he and his brother Dasnell. That's the statue. If you've ever been to Lakeview Cemetery, the one that they just fixed with the hand that was off, you saw on the paper, that was part of that family. So, and that brothers ended up purchasing this property here and turning it into a farm. But first, before they did that, they cut down all the trees, pine trees mostly, put them on rafts, and took them down through Pittsburgh to be sold, and then walked back up, which is what I hear a lot of those stories from this area. So that was pretty common. But then he had this farm. They also started Allen's Opera House from the 1870s to 1890s. They were involved in the alpaca works, the cane seat chair company in Jamestown. They worked with Daniel Grandin in the mills. So you can see the businesses that they kind of started. He and his wife, Margaret Cook Allen, had 8 children, but only 2 survived. And of those 2, Alfred is the one that we'll talk about in a minute. But I just want to talk about Margaret for a minute, because she and her husband were very instrumental in some of the social reform movements of the time. They were abolitionists. They were they were part of the political equality movements to give women, hopefully give women the right to vote. This was way before it happened, but they started that. They were also really concerned with child welfare and child labor laws. And this is getting a little bit of history I'm starting to do, but looking at the 1865 census, the Allens, the Grandins, the Kents, they all had servants living with them that were African Americans that were coming from the South. So that's an interesting part. We're just starting to do that research, but you can see that they were all connected with this kind of system of abolitionism. And after the war ended, they kind of had these people come live in their homes. And eventually they ended up leaving, and they probably went on to something else. But that was a stop for them after the war. Alfred, their son, was the manager of this farm, this area here, on the south side when he was very young. And he married Virginia Mahoon, and she Virginia Allen, and she when he was 37 years old, he died, and Virginia became the inheritor of this property with her sons, Augustus II and Alfred Jr. And they're the ones that developed this park and the residential neighborhoods that you see around here. So in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they started selling off property, and you start seeing the houses being built. Many of the houses that you see here were around 1909 to 1920, but that's part of what they were selling off. And then she's the one that became very concerned with it becoming all residential. So in 1908, she gave this property to the city so that it could become a park forever. So that's how Allen Park came. What I think is really interesting is that it's all coming through these kind of women in the family. We're very strong players in this. And Virginia had to even fight her sons a bit on this park idea. Eventually they came along, but there was a lot of back and forth about if we were going to give this much property, what was going to happen. But she was insistent that she wanted it to be a park. So that's a little background of the Allens family. We had people play Ebba and Arthur Goranson on the cemetery tours a few years ago. The band shell is dedicated to them. It was dedicated after it was built, so it was about 1966, 53. Before that, these two bands would alternate playing in Allen Park here on a hay wagon. So they would be on top of a wagon and people would sit, and they would have 300, 400 people come to see the concerts. So, and then they would alternate between that and Fenton Park. Fenton Park was where Rite Aid is now, down at Brooklyn Square, that area. And then they decided they wanted to combine so that they could maybe build a band shell, maybe build a permanent location for them to play. And when they combined is when they started to let women in. Before that, there was no women musicians in either of these bands. They also decided at that time they were going to let student musicians in. So the students that they were teaching in the schools became part of the municipal band. They rehearsed or tried out and practiced and became part of that. So it was a great way to get the community together. And so the bands got together and raised a lot of money, like you do with fundraising, mostly from civic, church, and fraternal organizations, and it was formally dedicated October 2nd, 1961. About when these were put in and how they came to be, in some reports are like, some newspaper articles say 1800s when that wasn't even, it wasn't happening. So I started to look at the Jamestown Post-Journal in the 1930s, and that is when most of the stonework that you see now was put in. Between 1933 and 1935, as part of the Federal Emergency Relief Administration. The FERA, FERA was the new name given by the Roosevelt administration to the Emergency Relief Administration, which President Hoover had created in 1932. The FERA was established as a result of the Federal Emergency Relief Act and was replaced in 1935 by the Works Progress Administration. So a lot of times when people were talking about this, they would say either it was built in the 1800s or it was built by the WPA as a work progress project. The only real true work progress project in Jamestown listed on their page is the Jamestown High School.
Where you'd enter to go across the street on your side. In the middle was a box area, which inevitably was where the manhole cover was, and there was often a park bench there, and kind of you were halfway.
Up and go towards the playground. So. Well, I know there's 1, 2, 3, 4. By the City Parks Department to be placed here, so it was part of the park. They found it in the park. in May of 1943 to honor the men from Allen Park neighborhoods who had served in World War II, and also those who were killed. I think there was at one point 113 servicemen, 8 of them were killed in World War II. And their names are on the back of the plaque here. And I do have some photographs of that ceremony, as well as the mother placing the wreath on the boulder here. And so I thought that that was just so incredible that the club was started kind of as a coffee club, essentially, mothers getting together, but then became that service club, particularly during the war, to work to try to help the servicemen and women as much as they could, the Red Cross, and I'll let Carol tell a little bit more of that if she would.
Okay, I'll still do a little bit about the boulder.
Yes.
We still have a ceremony every year, usually raining, but we have all of the service people that have died from this area in every conflict. So we're here every spring and we sing and we have, it's really very, very moving. But as Jen said, it started in 1943 as a little grassroots coffee clutch in somebody's living room to help their children and other people that were fighting the war. Eventually it turned into a wonderful group of women that really take care of Allen Park, along of course with the City Parks Department. But we've got about 50 members right now. Everybody is active in it. We have a wonderful time. We do, as you know, we sell fudge at the summer banquet band shop. We along with a lot of other things. But we have fundraisers. We get together every month, and we try to help out the area. We still belong. We help out Blue Star Mothers, who is also a service organization for active military. So we still have our hand in that kind of organization too.
One time there were 181 service people remembered by the club. Cards as well as packages were made. Homemade fudge was apparently their favorite. Still is. Each month the minutes reported thank you notes from the service people. And we still remember our service people. So that we've continued this now, this outreach.
And praise and sing to God the King, and peace to men on earth. And all the towns of Crowley, we wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Well, could you ice skate at Roseland?
Yeah.
Mine was always the one I could fly.
It was not intimidating at all. Not that the ice arena is, but it can be at some point. And it was just so much fun. I remember the concession stand. I remember the cake, or where you got your skates, and the locker room, and all of that. And I'm sure it's all still. I haven't been in there for years, so I don't know what it looks like inside now. But they do roller derby in there, so I'm sure most of it's still there. The ice skating rink at Allen Park started. Well, it was documented. Started with the parks in the 1940s. Outside, which I didn't realize that. And Walter Carlson, who worked for the city, would ice over baseball fields at Roseland Park and Allen Park's tennis courts. And there were makeshift heaters and toilets for skaters, and there was nearby outhouses and wood warming stations with coal stoves. And they played music, and it was just, it just looked so wonderful having that done. There was an incident that they recalled in the paper in 1952, and they actually printed all the kids' names, which was really funny to me. But the kids all stuck their tongue to one of the pipes at the ice skating rink, and the policeman Homer Danielson had to come out in his car, the sirens going, and they made him a big spectacle of it. I think to teach the kids a lesson more than to make an emergency. But and they printed all their names, and I can't remember who they were, but I'll try to find that and put it on Facebook or something, because it would be fun to find if those kids are who they are now.
Let me tell you about my hometown. It's a year-round land of vacation. And nearby, on the lakes, the Chautauqua Institution. Jameston, Jamestown, New York. That's my hometown. Jamestown, New York. That's my hometown. With our industry, our lakes and parks, it's great for work and play. We have the best of radio in WXYJ. Falconer and Bemis Point and Lakewood are all nearby. Jamestown, New York, that's my hometown. Jamestown, New York, that's my hometown. When a product is stamped, made in Jamestown N.Y, you can bet your bottom dollar it's the best that money can buy. I recommend it for a lifetime or just a day. Jamestown, New York, that's my hometown. Jamestown, New York, that's my
If you don't know, we were started in 1942 as an organization to help with a war effort. And that was our cause for many years, and to honor the men who had died from this area in the service. Recently, we felt that we needed a new cause and a new project to work on, and we decided that the park was what needed our attention and our care. And knowing that city budgets couldn't do everything, we decided to undertake the project of a new playground, not quite knowing what we were getting ourselves into. From the project, we got the joy of working together, and that was truly a blessing to our club. We got the response from the community, including very, very touching memories of growing up in Allen Park and being here with family and friends and celebrating special occasions. And some of the postcards and letters and stories that people told us were thank the foundation, starting off with the Chautauqua Region Community Foundation, because under their leadership we were able to establish our fund to which people could donate their monies. And if the fund, probably the most visible to the community, was our sale of memorial bricks. So, because it's a lovely addition to our park. On our program book for the Allen Park Women's Club, every year we have a quote from Hugo Black. It is, "The glory of life is to love, not to be loved, to give, not to get, to serve, not to be served." We've tried to live up to this ideal and to our new club motto, which was especially selected for this project, but's being used as an ongoing part of our club, the Allen Park Women's Club, making memories for the next generation. Thank you all for helping make our dream a reality.
The only clay court, tennis court in the city.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Vestiges of the old clay courts. Softball fields. 1940 Allen Park baseball team played there.
Jamestown, New York, that's my hometown.
Billy, 'cause Billy knows just where to walk. And when I talk, I always talk with Billy, 'cause Billy knows just how to talk. And when I dine, I always dine with Billy, 'cause he takes me where I get my fill. Want you to know I love him so. I just want to be with Bill.
On July 19th, over 3,000 fans came out to see their Falcons take on Hamilton at Allen Park. The home team's Henry Nowak launched a late-inning two-run homer to send the crowd home happy with a 7-5 win. This was the starting lineup. Here's a picture of the 1940 team.
It's brand new, by the way.
So we're going to go down to the waiting pool, and then we'll end the tour. So, and I'll come back up here and I'll sit down and I have some photos if you want to look at me.
Were you at breakfast with Terry? As you didn't live anywhere. I knew Susan so well, you know. Yeah. And here I was.
The new look.
There's a time in each year that we always hold dear. Good old summertime, with the birds in the trees and sweet scented breezes. Good old summertime, when your day's work is over, then you are in clover, and life is one beautiful time. No trouble annoying, each one is enjoying the good old summertime. In the good old summertime, in the good old summertime, strolling through the shady lanes with my baby mine. You hold her hand and she holds yours, and that's a very good sign, a sign that she's your Tootsie Wootsie in the good old summertime. In the good old summertime.
Cool, I'm part of the public, the FBRA projects in the 30s, and was just a waiting pool for a while, but then it got built up more in the 40s, 50s, and like I mentioned, I can go in there and it's taller than me on the other end. So, I always was fascinated by this as a kid. Like, I just was like, what was this? You know, I wanted to know about it. My grandma would tell me about it. You know, it was a wading pool, and then it became a swimming pool. And I was always like, why did it close? What happened? You know, how? Well, you can imagine it closed because of disease. Mostly, it closed in 1956, and I don't think they reopened it again for a little bit, and then it closed again in the 60s, and it was done. So they had the health department come in, and in 1956, the Buffalo News reported that the wading pool at Allen Park has been labeled a swimming pool, and the state health department has ordered that it be drained because of polluted water. And so the 1944 article in the Post-Journal said the Allen Park pool was being cleaned today under a plan adopted after a conference between the mayor and Chris Hansen, superintendent of the park department, and Charles Strandberg, director of public works. The officials decided to have the pool cleaned twice a week instead of once a week. And most of this came from polio. You know, this was the time of polio, and people were just terrified that was where it was coming from and what was happening. And so they described in that article how the pool was cleaned, which I thought was really interesting. This morning, a crew of workers was engaged in scrubbing the pool basin with lye and flushing it thoroughly. In an effort to combat the formation of algae on the bottom and sides of the pool, copper sulfite crystals will be introduced into the water. Water in the pool will also be chlorinated in a further attempt to destroy any bacteria. So that's what they started to do in the 40s, and then by the 50s, the State Department, Health Department came in and said, this is not a wading pool, it's too deep, and you gotta close it. So that's what happened. I just was fascinated by, this and wanting it to be reopened, but, there's so much liability nowadays, it's almost impossible for something like this to happen. But it was such a popular spot. Kids took swimming lessons here. In 1952, they had 2 lifeguards on duty every day except for Sunday, and they would have swimming lessons at 1 and 3. And it said that they offered swimming instruction of elementary strokes, dead man's float, bobbing for breath control, swimming strokes including breaststroke, side stroke, underwater swimming, Australian crawl, and backstroke. They also taught life-saving techniques as well. And so that was happening every day. And they said that average 200 kids a day. So it was pretty amazing to imagine that.
Like great.
Imagine, there you go.
This is a beautiful place to come. It's like the next place to heaven, isn't it?